Very good morning to all of you. My name is Jonathan. I lead the OT business in Fortinet for Singapore. So today we're going to talk about deception design, applying OT or deception technology into the OT environment. So what is deception? Well, deception really, you can think of it like a mirror maze. If you've been to amusement park where there is a lot of mirrors, it's going to be always claustrophobic because you don't know what is real and what is not. So chances most of the time you have to touch and see your way through. That's why they give you a stick so that you can interact and make sure that you don't bump into things. Now, deception technology is exactly the same thing. We are going to lay a whole layer of deceptive assets over the network environment without causing a loss of availability. So it really adds on to your defense in depth strategy. The main problem always is that in defense in depth, you are expected to be 100% correct all the time. So you put on your multiple layers, but if you know, right, that some things don't always happen as you want them to be. You may have to patch stuff. Could be a firewall, could be a switch or a router. And you might have to take things down offline and you don't patch it on time. You may have, you have to scale your network, Industry 4.0, add more new stuff in, connect OT to IT. And that's going to add up a lot more risk. But what deception technology does, it puts the onus on the threat actor. So much so that whenever something happens, then you'll see that actually, you then detect, and then you can arrest, and then you can address the issue. And the onus is then not on the mistake of the defender, but on the attacker itself. So what is deception? Deception fundamentally, the idea, right, is really to detect attackers. And it could be an automated system, it could be a malware or a human attacker that manages to infiltrate your network, whether it's going to be air gap or not, into deceiving to them to engage into a fake asset. Something that looks like it, feels like it, reacts like it, and then you isolate them as well. And in total, there's always 4 elements that really forms up a deception technology. The first one will be a decoy system. So it could be your fake network devices, it could be your fake applications, it could even be a fake PLC or a fake SCADA network or fake sensor. Then it will be layers, will be that your SCADA systems, your network traffic applications, basically decoys and honeypots. The third thing will be traffic. So interactive traffic makes people think that it is a real device. It is a real network, and cause breadcrumbs, where you put fake resources on real IT assets, real devices, and point them back to the real system. So it's all about creating a whole fake decoy system to lure them away from your assets to a fake asset, and then you can address the issue, and then you get a lot of information when they interact with it. So decoy systems or deception systems really gives you a lot of focus in a way where you can actually reduce the number of false positives, because each and every alert that comes out of it is probably an interaction with an attacker. So one of the things I realized when I talk about deception is that most people will say, is it the same thing as honeypots? What's the difference? Now, honeypot systems and deception systems fundamentally have the same idea, that they are meant to deceive and lure people away from your real assets. And it's a low technology 35 years ago, but it's never really meant to be, it was meant to be simple emulation tools used for research. Don't really put into the production environment, not really meant for inline protection. And they were used for, and they were really high intensity, high resource to maintain. It's not always easy to set it up, maintain it, operate it, much less so to scale. So when it's so easy when it's easy networking or emulation, right, it's not going to be highly interactive. It's very easy to fingerprint it. Whereas when you look at deception, what you're looking at is really deception assets that are placed throughout the entire network on endpoints. And if you want to grow, you have a series of automated systems that will have to grow along the way as well. What's also great about deception, right, is the ability to recommend, the system can actually automatically recommend where your assets can be created, what should be created, where do you place them with. They also provide a capacity control. So when, let's say, for example, you are running your system, it's 24/7 availability, and patching is not an option. So then what you can do even then now is that, and this is very common when you talk about OT environments, you can't patch because it's running. Yeah? So, and in maintenance windows, right, in OT environments, you know, it's going to take weeks, months, of years. In deception as well, you can actually spin up a refresh deception access based on attacker engagement, or suspicious network activity, or any ongoing hygiene routine. Plus, they don't really require high-skilled security analysis. Modern deception technology is very much automated. Yeah? Deception provides high interaction decoys, so you can ping it and you respond. You can interact with it. And when that happens, you can get attacker information easily during an engagement. This gives you a lot of high fidelity alerts. Gives you that chance really to provide a lot of forensic reporting, and even to the extent where you can actually enable automated incident response. So what I'm saying is that sometimes deception technology really adds flavor to your current defense in-depth policies. Yeah? So later on we'll talk a lot more about it. And the concept of when you put an entire network a trap, right, what you can do is you can really detect and attack earlier in the kill chain, organize and gather organization-specific threat intel, and disrupt the attacker before they can do any damage. So why use deception again? One thing, I mentioned it earlier on, OT systems lack security by design, brittle to change. They're costly to manage. Your maintenance windows are managed in months and years. So patching is not always an option, especially sometimes, well, we can do vulnerability shielding at the network layer, but when you need to patch your firewalls and take it down, if they're not in a cluster, then deception gives you the ability to really shield those devices by putting a whole layer of decoy systems. The other thing is also about diverse multi-vendor assets. So you do have a lot of systems that are legacy OS, and you don't really have patches for it as well. Now, what decoy can do is to secure those assets by also, again, placing a whole deceptive layer over it. Why use deception technology again? Because IT and OT, the air gap is decreasing. It's a trend. In most companies, when I talk about Industry 4.0, it's all about integration. Third thing about why you want to put OT, deception OT for OT environments, is that because you want to minimize, right, your team so that they don't get too stretched. If you're looking at, in most SOC environments, there's always a high rate of positive alerts, fake positive alerts, out of which only 5%, or slightly more than that, investigated. Now, what deception do, it gives you very high fidelity. If there is an alert, it is not going to be false positive because it means that something is interacting with your decoys. So it's very similar for overall, even if it's going to talk about IT or OT, the challenges facing security teams really, it's always very challenging to detect attackers. Current systems, now you have defense in depth. You might have a lot of people that come in, you have to be perfect all the time. You can't really detect lateral movement, so someone's in, they dwell, they move from point to point. It's quite difficult to stretch it as well. The other thing about it is that assets don't really provide their own telemetry. Yeah? So deception layer provides that tool to give you that protection over OT assets. So if we talk about rules, right, NIST is a global standard of how we want to control confidential unclassified information. So we have SP 0800-172, talks about using deception to confuse and mislead adversaries regarding information used for decision making. And even something more specific, SP 882 revision 3, specific to OT security. What they say is that you need to, because decoys do not actively interact with other network components, deception technology can support malicious activity monitoring and detection without jeopardizing the control process. So it's very much, what it's saying is that deception technology is passive, it's non-intrusive, and you can continue your operations without any further interruption. So overall, how does it work? Well, the first step of it when you put appliance in, you don't need to hold down the system, is that when you connect to your network, first thing happens. There will be a passive asset discovery over all your network. So every VLAN, whether it's going to be a switch, router, laptop, control system per se, there is a mapping of what's in your network. So when that happens, when the system has gathered enough information, it then can provide the second step, which is where it can recommend, it can spin out decoys. You could do it automatically where the system does it for you, or you can spin out, or you can make custom decoys as well. Yeah? So after which, right, it can look for available IP addresses to use in your network as well, and then place those decoys there as well. So it makes it very, very authentic in that sense, where the deception layer is very much somewhat integrated, but not integrated into your network. The next steps involve detection. So that is where you have high interactive decoys that will engage with, with one of the attacker engages with your decoy. So it could be in the sense where an endpoint comes and tries to collect data. They will be exposed to the fake network that we place on the endpoint, and that fake network will interact with the decoy, this fake data. So three things happen when we do that. First, the decoy generates an alert on the UI, which can also send it by email or syslog to your SIM and SOR. Second, the decoy starts capturing and analyzing the activities in real time and generates threat intelligence that's used for threat mitigation, for example, quarantining the affected endpoint. And for those who are more technical in nature, right, this is an overall view of how that looks. So a disrupted appliance comes in. Every single VLAN, be it the Windows endpoints, which you see in OT all the time, your IoT, your Linux devices, your SCADA networks, your PLCs, and every single VLAN, there is a mapping. And beyond that, we also do things like your file server. So you can actually set up a file template, send it in, feed it to the decoy system, and you'll generate fake files as well. Applications. And when the system is decoyed, your VMs are decoyed, it sends that alerts. Also, not forgetting the fact that when you put tokens on your endpoints, fake decoding, it leads you back to the fake assets, and then this whole cycle begins. So you see that deception technology adds on to your current defense in-depth policies. When your alert comes in, it integrates with SIM and SOR, providing a few actions all the way to detecting a threat origin, so you can orchestrate. You can identify who is your source, where is the endpoint that it happened, or where did it originate from, and you can do your effective blocking analysis as well. So there are a couple of use cases. If you look at the Purdue model, which all of us are quite conversant with, we can actually spin decoys in all levels of the network. From the control area zone, layer 1, 2, we can emulate PLCs, HMI, sensors, legacy assets, to SCADA management systems in layer 3.5, and servers with fake data and OT devices, all the way up to the enterprise zone where you have your ERP systems, POS systems, or web application, critical apps. We can put layers on every single laptop and servers. So what are the most common use cases? Well, we talked about it earlier on, but let me crystallize it a little bit. In OT system, it gives you a form where you can do a lot of network visibility, breach detection via a very passive footprint. So it's not intrusive, it's not active, it's passive. You can detect threats to assets that don't provide their own telemetry. The second thing is that we can actually do early detection alerts with response from ransomware. So assuming there's an attacker seeking to encrypt files, when you put a deception layer over it, you can actually have decoys that feed the malware with fake data, fake files that will divert and contain the attack, and then give you the alert awareness as well. So you don't get infected, but you're aware what is the intent, what is the TTP of an attacker, and you can address it before anything happens. It's early alerts. It gives you an idea also the ability to keep the malware from encrypting new data, real data, and spread. So you can actually detect things like lateral movements, as opposed to detecting tracks that come in and out, ingress and egress. Gives you an idea also about what last resort security controls are, where you can detect when all other systems fail. Say you have your defense in depth, say you have put in a lot of segmentation policies per se. Yeah, but that deception will come in and prevent threat actors from happening, whether it's inline, outline, whether it's air gap or not. whether it's AI or whether it's a human attacker. So it gives you breadth to your current strategies in defense in depth, active defense strategies, and it gives you a less noisy environment. So when you're in a SOC team, high reduction of false positive rates. Yeah, you can use your deception layers to track where is your attack origin, where did all these attacks come from, which are the infected endpoints, where is the entry point per se. And then you can learn, because interaction with decoys gives you a lot of data which you can use then for forensic purposes in a very highly monitored environment. So these are the 4 common use cases that we have in terms of like where and how we can actually deploy a deception technology in an OT environment. So one of this win story and a use case study we have is basically an energy company that is operating retail outlets, oil and gas. Basically, it's a gas station. So these stations are one of the locations, of course, that will be open nationwide during the pandemic. And they had to expand by putting supermarkets, small supermarkets throughout the whole gas station, self-payment kiosks, self-ordering online, other services to support demand for basic supplies during the pandemic, of course, other than supplying and selling gas. So they grew very fast. They had additional services. With that comes in a lot of expansion in their attack surface, and as well as their newly called apps that collect sensitive data information as well. So what the team really was concerned about was that there could be an attacker or insider, right, that could compromise a remote site, be it a gas station, be it a convenience store, break into on-site equipment or the company's network and cause damages. So to do this and prevent such attacks and attacks, they sought a solution that really could safeguard their various business operations with accurate and early detection in response to secure their locations and services. So after a while, deception technology was something that we could explore to safeguard against unknown threats. So they expanded across their whole entire company. What we then had really was we created an active deception layer across the IT and OT environment, covering all the crown jewels. So you don't have to like, hey, put it everywhere. You can actually pay a special emphasis on what's important. And those decoys included pumps, tank gauges, automated tank gauges, cameras, physical security, ERP systems in terms of payment and golden images. So they created, we can feed golden images and to create decoys. And in this case, they needed industrial ruggedized devices. So deception can come in a few forms and factors. It could be a ruggedized system, it could be a VM, it could be a server-grade appliance. Another result they had was that they could close the SOC visibility gap. So what they had also was that it provides really in-progress attack intel and detailed forensics captured by the attacker's activities. Yeah, so that gave them a lot of information. And the last one is really about using deception as compensatory control. So with the same idea, you see, they used decoys, they used fork tokens to protect critical assets when you can't really patch. So it gives you a whole, a deception layer, and where you can actually secure the systems and uptime and maintaining it. So the last thing is, of course, about enhancing visibility and access and accelerate incident response. So when you have an active or a defense in-depth strategy, you can actually use a deception layer, and they actually used it to integrate with their existing defense in-depth policy and third-party service controls. It is a platform integrated into another platform to reduce, of course, fake positive alerts, and gives you a lot of information where you can provide correlation and forensics. So in this case, you can see that also deception layer gives you that ability to identify whether it's going to be a series, events, campaigns. Gives you a lot of information to say what is their attack origins, how did they do it, what's the procedure which they do it, and then we can actually address all these weak points in your network. Similar story, but in this case, it's basically talking about IoMT, medical devices. Same image, but in this case, they actually use the deception layer to produce things like pumps, infusion pumps, picture archiving servers, cameras, and golden images. So they use hardware applications, of course, to do all this. And the same principle applies. You see, visibility, compensating control when patching is not available, reducing fake positive alerts, and giving you a very much needed angle in handling correlation and forensics. So very quickly, why should everyone use deception in OT? It's really not intrusive. So when you set it up, you don't have to down the system. It operates, it's automated. So it spins out decoys, recommends where you should want to place them, and you can scale and grow even as your attack posture or security posture increases or when there's new, when your attack surface expands. So you can actually scale, you can actually learn the analysis, enable the analysis to learn attacker's intent, detect threats easily, gives you early warning with almost zero fake positive alerts. So why deception in OT? How else would you know if attackers are inside your network? How fast can you detect them? How do you protect devices that cannot provide their own telemetry or cannot be protected using monitoring assets or patching? And the last one is really about how do you plan to reduce positive alerts? Are you looking at time to reduce time spent on reviewing alerts? So what do you want to look for when you are looking in the market for deception technology and OT? The first thing is really about you've got to have a system that provides decoys for both IT and OT. Aligns with the Purdue model at almost all levels. If you can do ICS Scala profiles, that would be a must-have, like all the control vendors that are available in the market. And in OT environment, you see a lot of IT equipment. So Windows, Linux, with JIT, VPN, applications, and honey tokens as well. So second thing is that it's really simple and easy. It's automated discovery of assets. You don't have to do anything. You just plug it in. You can leverage on AI to recommend deployment where they are, using existing IP addresses as well. And it gives you a holistic response. So it adds flavor to what you have right now. It doesn't mean that when you have deception, you can change. When you have this deception, you should actually accentuate what you're doing in your current active defense strategy. So it gives you things like threat response, threat hunting, forensics. It gives you that flavor and ability to understand more of what's happening in your network with regards to threat actors, whether it's going to be automated, whether it's going to be humans, or is it going to be a malicious insider. So in summary, what is deception? How does it work? I provided some information on use cases in OT environments and success stories that's been deployed around the world. So at least 2 of them in 2 different sectors. So that really brings me a very quick conclusion to my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that quite concise presentation on deception technology. Also very interesting. Can I invite you to take a seat, please?
Yeah.
We're going to have a short Q&A right now with Jonathan. So ladies and gentlemen, I think you know what to do. We're going to bring up the QR code. You can input some of the questions if you have any comments or clarifications that you'd like Jonathan to address right now. And as I said yesterday, no one used the microphones along the aisles. We have ushers ready to hand them to you if you would like to pose questions the traditional way. So we already have some questions coming up on slide. And perhaps, Jonathan, you want to answer this first one. Is deception required if IT and OT are air-gapped?
Yes. Well, deception, right, doesn't just look at when you're connected to the network or to IT. It also works when you are in an air-gap situation. And why I say this, that in air-gap situations, there's many big threat factors, many ingress of attack. It's not just about from the internet coming in. In OT environment, you have an army of contractors, vendors. You've got people who back the result of social engineering, malicious insiders as well. That seek to compromise systems, or you have people who are basically very lax in their hygiene controls. Now, what deception does, even in an OT air gap situation, is that it gives you a lot of detail. Where does the internet come from? And it gives you that kind of information also, like, hey, if there's going to be an attacker, sometimes they don't react fast. They remain in, they have a long period of dwell time, probably about 21 days on average. So using deception, right, gives you that kind of ability to detect those attacks. Attack who's dwelling, who's probing, and then giving you a feedback by which you can then react on it.
Actually, I'm curious, how do you even get into this niche of deception technology? Let's take a step back, okay?
I'll say it again, sorry.
How did you even get into this niche of deception technology?
How do I get into it? I think, well, I mean, I've been looking at all angles in technology. I mean, one of my businesses is really to see how I can help my customers in the OT systems, create a system where it actually helps them defend against attacks. So one of the things that when I looked around, I found that, hey, deception technology really works because those three basic criteria is that it's passive, it's not intrusive, it's automated, it kind of reduces the risk. It also helps you in terms of like when you have not enough skilled people, which is a real problem right now. Deception actually takes off the load of the human part of it by providing a lot of AI automation.
But what would you say to detractors who insist that investing in deception technology is just really costly and it's and also you have to maintain the system too, right? So what would you say to that?
Okay, going by one costly thing. So when you look at from a cost point of view, you're also looking at how you can actually reduce that human effort. So like when you do a SOC team, we talk about threat response, all that data comes back to you, reduces that human effort to do analysis, to trace and track origins. It is also automated. So there's a lot of AI-based component. You react a lot more faster. And so from a dollar point of view, from a human interaction point of view, cybersecurity cost point of view, you're looking at everything that moves faster. So when you move faster, right, you spend less time, which adds to less cost.
That's why you had that on your slide. It's value for money. Okay, still staying on the topic of cost, here's another question. What is the estimated amount of resources needed to maintain a deceptive layer with the current market technology? Is it possible that the deception layer fails in the event of mass traffic, that is DDoS?
To maintain.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, yes.
Number 5.
Okay, yeah. Basically, when you have deception technology, right, it doesn't really add more to your deception layer. It's actually a layer above it, you know. So when you're talking from the production operator point of view, the production operator doesn't really see your fake assets. So there's no load on it as well. So when there is a deception layer that fails in a mass traffic, you got to know that it's not connected to that net. It is connected, but it's appliance to provide another deceptive layer. So it still remains alive when there's something else below it that is affected. So deception is just another layer on top of your original layer.
And for members in the audience who may be considering really investing or applying this technology, what are some of the practical considerations or challenges that they should take note of when trying to integrate deception technology into existing OT systems or strategies?
I think the thing that you want to look at is that, okay, firstly, deception, right? It's not going to be a digital twin. Yeah, it's going to be a near complete replica of your network in terms of assets, PLCs, applications. So it's not going to add to your network traffic. It's not going to add to your systems. Now, what it does good, right, is that if you're talking about a red team, blue team thing, it tests a lot of what your red team's ability is in terms of invading deception assets and understanding what it is. So it gives you a lot of that thing. So going back to challenges, there isn't much challenges per se, but you want to like look at, okay, crown jewels. Where do you want to focus more of your decoys and assets around it? What kind of files you want to put. So you got to prepare the file templates you want to consider to feedback. You want to consider what are your crown jewels that you want to defend at, must have. You want to also look at what's important, you know. So what are the golden images that you want to spend assets on. So the AI can do it for you, but I think sometimes in your strategy, you want to make sure that you focus more attention on what's really important, which is all the things that are really, really critical that you can't live without.
I think it's important that you highlighted deception technology is vastly different from from a digital twin, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back to another question here. What is stopping threat actors from acquiring deception technology to learn and detect and then bypass it?
Well, when you have deception technology basically AI-based, additional layer on top. Now, to learn and detect it, right, it's, okay, when you look at honeypot is very simple emulation systems. It doesn't interact. You can bypass your fingerprint easily. When you look at deception technology, right, you're looking at a system that appears and looks like a real thing. It interacts, it responds back. So, but when you do that, right, when an attacker looks at and interacts and responds back and then finds out that it could be a fake thing, right, it's a little bit too late because your fingerprint is there. When the defender comes in, they realize that, okay, I already require enough information from you to know that, yeah, this is an attacker. So it's more like, okay, you can try to find and bypass it, but when you interact with it, you find there's a response. It's highly interactive. Then you know, but then it's too late. So I can actually, it's a chicken and egg story, so.
Well, that makes sense. Well, why is deception technology then particularly critical for safeguarding your OT environments compared to your IT environments? I think you talked a little bit about this in your presentation, but perhaps maybe a bit more detail as to comparing between OT and IT.
Okay, so for OT environments, it's passive. It has to be, the key thing about OT environments is availability. Yeah, so everything else has to be is secondary, but keeping the system running is first. In deception technology, when you add this in, you still maintain your availability no matter what. Yeah? So IT systems, right, generally if a lot of time to do a lot of patches, a lot of time to do remediation, you can shut down the system for, well, on weekends or Sunday, but when you're talking about 24/7 plant that runs, you don't have that luxury. And it's always going to take a long while, 2 years for a major shutdown before you can do a lot of patching and stuff. Now, but when you apply deception, right, like what I mentioned earlier on, it's passive, it's not intrusive. It gives you the kind of options where when you can't patch your firewalls, when you can't patch other critical systems, cybersecurity systems, deception gives you the added layer of protection on providing that fake decoys around so that when you don't have time to patch, at least you have decoys that will shield those assets that you don't want to be infected.
Do you have any tips for users on how they can manage the risk of false positives and negatives? Because, I mean, identifying these false positives, it's tedious, it's time consuming.
Yeah, so use deception.
Really? That's it? Just 2 words, use deception. Anything
No,
else?
because deception really does that,
But you're making a really compelling case for using deception technology, I have to say.
Yeah. Because anything that comes out of deception technology, the only thing that causes an alert to come out is when it interacts with an attacker. Now, there's not much false positive because the production user, the legit users can't really see it, so they don't interact with fake devices. So the only people are people who don't have access, and then they go in and then they look at a decoy and then they interact with it, and that causes a legitimate alert. So it kind of reduces a lot of fake positive, in fact, almost massive reduction of fake positive alerts.
And then here's another question. How do you channel the attackers to decoys instead of the real assets? That one just came in.
Okay, one of the things that we have for, I mentioned about the 4 pillars of deception technology is lures, breadcrumbs. So what the deception technology do is create a whole fake series of credentials. So whenever an attacker comes, one of the things that he wants to spread, he wants to propagate, and the one thing he do from one point to another is to steal cache credentials to infect another system, gain access and infect another system. Now, we put in fake credentials on every single asset, and it's real assets. In your real assets is script. And those credentials will actually lure you back and lead you back to the fake asset, the fake mirror asset that is there. So that's one of the ways that we do it. Yeah, and then the system then, the attacker then interacts with the fake asset, and then the whole story continues.
Well, speaking of breadcrumbs, let's move to crown jewels then. What if the threat actors compromise Oh, you guys are keeping your questions fast and furious. Thank you. And also putting Jonathan under the fire today. What if the threat actors compromise the deception technology and launches an attack against your crown jewels? Not yours, sorry, the crown jewels. Just have to, differentiate it there. I know some of you caught the joke, but yes.
So your question is, what if the attacker compromises my deception technology and then the crown jewels? The deception technology doesn't interact with the current life environment. Yeah, the only thing it does, of course, it put breadcrumbs and credentials, but it's a fake network all by itself. So in a way, that's all it does. So that's why your system can continue running, network availability is 100%, because it's a virtual network on top of it.
Okay, Jonathan, you've been doing really well so far. I just have a couple more questions here. Thanks, guys. At this point in time, before I ask him that question, I know, don't check the clock. You're good, you're good. Any other questions from the floor, members of the audience? Last call. Yes, okay, let's bring, finally, and that's Justin. Justin, that's right. Can we bring the microphone to Justin, please? Our first brave soul asking questions live.
Could you name a couple vendors that actually sell products that can actually create these deceptive clone and deceptive techniques for us?
Oh, one of which is Fortinet. Yeah, so you can come by and then, we have that.
And anybody else?
I think there's a couple of tools. It's a small market, actually. It's set to grow. I think over the years, there have been a few startups, and they didn't continue because they couldn't sustain it. But if you look at Gartner, right, that business is supposed to grow for the next couple of years up to 2024. It's $1 billion business. I think because there's a lot of emphasis to say, hey, actually, deception is critical. For the basic reasons I mentioned earlier, it's passive, it's not intrusive, it's automated. There's 2 or 3 more, like Trapex and a few others, but Fortinet,
You can't make him mention other suppliers. Yes, Dale.
Okay, so Fortinet has a lot of solutions. There's also a lot of other solutions out there. Where would you put deploying deception technology in the list of things that the people in this audience should do? Like you have segmentation technologies, you have intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. So even just your company, not even looking at your competitors, probably has 5, 7, 10 different things that an asset owner could buy and do. Where on that list would you put deception? Is it at the top, the first thing you should do? Do you need like all these things in place and then you should think about deception?
Okay, so deception is actually it's advanced threat protection technology. Now, what deception does, right, is to accentuate what you have right now. So I'm not saying that IPS is not important, endpoint protection, EDR is not important, segmentation is not important. Those are all important. Now, what deception does is that it gives you that flavor when you can't patch. So I would say that it's kind of hard to say whether it's at the top of the list because defense in depth is still important. But when you look at use cases like, hey, my firewall needs patching, and if they're in a cluster, it's fine, you can still patch. But when you're not in a cluster in a single one, you may need to take it down and then update it, and that requires downtime. And that's where deception becomes very important because it gives you the kind of at least compensating control. I put a whole layer of decoy that I defend against a potential malware, exploitation of those vulnerabilities. Yeah, so for us, even for deception, we kind of infuse our decoys, right, with IPS protection, signature-based, so that at least there's a lot of telemetry that comes out of it. Like when someone wants to look at exploiting a vulnerability, you know about it because there's a lot of web-based signature, there's a lot of web filtering signatures from our WAFs, from our firewalls in place there as well. Yeah, it's kind of hard to put it as number one. It's very much case-to-case basis, but it applies top of the mind when you can't patch the system in time. So when there's a weakness involved, then I'll place it as number one because then that will give you at least some control during that period. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Dale. Thank you, Jonathan. Any other questions from the floor today? I'm really liking this, finally, some live audience interaction. Or is that it? Just a show of hands, right? Who has dealt with deception technology or used it, is familiar with it? Just the front row? A couple of guys at the back. Okay, all right. So still lots of people new to deception technology. Are you convinced? Is it compelling, what Jonathan said today? Not? Yes? Any other questions? No? Zachary, you're not a deception technology guy? Not really? You've got others that you'd prefer to advocate? Okay, all right. We're staying out of it. We have one more question, Jonathan, and then
Yes.
we'll let you go, okay?
All right.
What was this? Yes. Have you tested this technology with the hacking community? And how did the result fare, if you've tested it out?
I think throughout the global community, I haven't tested it myself personally, but within Fortinet, yes, we've done it. We have use cases. We've deployed it before, and it works. Yeah. So one of the things I want to see, right, and I've been told a very good use case is when you play war games, so Cyber Range, there will be an excellent test against a red team's capability. So if I spin out a whole army of decoys and then I get a red team to detect, if I can evade, then they're good. If they can't evade, then yeah, my defense is good. Yeah.
Will you get to play that later in the Defend the Breach breakout? Maybe, right, Christopher? Yeah, he's smiling. Okay. All right. Well, if there are no more questions for Jonathan, I think we had a rapid-fire Q&A today,
Yeah.
much longer than you expected. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Jonathan Chin from Fortinet.